For the first minute or so, I invite you to concentrate on one thing and one thing only. I would like you to reflect on an experience of feedback that affected you. Where were you? What happened? What was said? But most importantly, how did it make you feel? Please raise your hand if the experience you are thinking about happened more than a month ago. More than 3 months? More than 6? More than a year? More than 5 years? Raise your hand if the experience that you reflected on was a positive one. Raise your hand if it was negative. That's a frightening majority. What that reveals is 2 startling truths about feedback. Number 1, it sticks with us for a long time. The second truth is that it can often be the negative feedback that we think of first. As human beings, we have a preoccupation with the negative. We're surrounded by it every day. News channels, social media. We're British. But therein lies a problem. Because we can experience 9 positive things and 1 negative, but by the time we arrive at here, we've forgotten about the 9 positive and we're stuck with the 1 negative. There is no such thing as neutral feedback, is there? Every piece of feedback you receive either builds you up or tears you down. And what worries me is that too many people in the world don't seem to understand that. And in an age where technology allows communication to be rapid and sometimes thoughtless, damage can be done, sometimes very quickly. But I'm here to provide solace, because I want to illustrate some key principles about feedback, why it matters, and how we can deliver it more effectively, and how we can receive it more effectively, thereby empowering us not just in Toastmasters, but in our homes, in our communities, in our workplaces. This year I was privileged to win, as Ed briefly mentioned, the District 71 Northern Britain and Ireland evaluation competition. If I get to the end of my life and I haven't become a great speaker, I'm alright with that. What I want to be remembered for is that I helped other speakers become better. And that award is significant to me, not just because it's a pretty trophy, but because it's a representation of the fact that over the 4 years I've been a member of Toastmasters, I've been privileged to receive some exceptionally good feedback from great speakers. I've been able to apply it, and I've now got myself into a position of experience where I feel able to deliver some of that to others. What you've seen tonight from Megan and Tom is an example of good feedback. Because good feedback is made up of 4 key ingredients. There are only 4 pieces to the puzzle, and these are those, in my experience. First, good feedback has to come from the heart. It has to come from somebody who cares. Brené Brown on Netflix talks about the call to courage. Watch it if you haven't, it's phenomenal. But what she says is she talks about the Theodore Roosevelt quote about the arena. And she says, if you receive feedback from somebody up in the stands who's not fighting at your side in the arena, don't take any interest in that feedback, because it's coming from a spectator, not from somebody who's in there fighting for you. We've seen that tonight. 2 great examples. It's sincere, it's warm, and it's encouraging. Good feedback has to be actionable. Whether it's in the workplace or here or anywhere else, if you give somebody a piece of feedback, that was good, keep it up, that could have been better, That's feedback, but it's not actionable. Can't do anything with it. Therefore, it loses its power. Good feedback also needs to be specific. You may look at me and think, gosh, you could do with a gym session. Probably right. That's actionable. I can go to the gym, but for how long? How often? To do what? To what end? That's the specificity that gives feedback its power. Somebody comes up to me and says, Simon, I'm a friend, I'm a runner too, I want you to get better at running. Come to the gym with me for 60 minutes on Friday to do these exercises, and we'll go running on Saturday to beat our time. That's specific. That's where feedback has its power. And feedback also needs to be timely. Those 4 things spell fast. And if you want to develop your feedback fast, these are the 4 things we need to be doing. If we don't do these 4 things, we may do damage fast that is difficult to repair. While I was at the conference in Norwich, I was privileged to spend some time with Marcus Hemsley, phenomenal speaker from Norwich Toastmasters Club. And he was speaking on the weekend that I was due to participate in that evaluation final, and he led me to deliver a different evaluation than I would have delivered otherwise. Why? Because he took me back to basics, and he talked about rhetoric. And he said, if you want to be a great evaluator, you first need to be a great speaker. And what do great speakers do? Rhetoric. Do you know the only school in this country that still teaches rhetoric as a curriculum subject? It's Eton. 19 of our prime ministers went there. What do they know that we don't? Probably a bit of this. So Marcus said there are 3 things that a speaker can do, and a speaker can do well, to engage their audience. And we've heard them quite a lot tonight because I've been listening. The first is a puzzle and a solution. You raise a question in your minds of your audience. You create curiosity. There is no feeling in a room so powerful as curiosity. Because once you've got them, you've got them. And they want to learn. Whether it's through a rhetorical question, an image, a quote, a story, you decide how to do it, but you want to raise a question and some curiosity in your audience's mind. You also want to create contrasts. Call it light and shade if you want, hope and sorrow, joy and sadness, fear and courage. You want to create that contrast, whether it's in a whole speech or an individual sentence, does not matter. But that's how you get an emotional reaction, is you create contrast. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And the rule of 3. It's simple, it's powerful, and it's underused. We need to do it more often. Bread and butter of effective speaking. If we can do this in our general speaking, our speaking will improve. If we can do this within our feedback to other people, our feedback will have greater impact and be longer lasting. Of that I have no doubt. How do we create contrasts? These are the tricky ones. Puzzle and solution, okay, rhetorical questions, I get that. Rule of 3, I get that. How do I create contrast? There are 4 ways. Contrast sitting here tonight with being confronted by that. That creates a contrast in your emotion, does it not? And I don't know who got close enough to take that picture, but they're a lot braver than I am. But the 4 types of contrast spell croc. Thanks to Paul, who spotted it. So I've adapted it for these purposes. You can create contrast in your speaking in 4 different ways. First one is contradiction. It's not this, but it's this. You're going to see examples of this in a minute, so do try to absorb it. You'll see it in practice and it'll make it easier. Contradiction. It's not that, it's that. Instant contrast. Reversal. Saying something one way and then the other. John F. Kennedy. I say no more. Phrase reversal. Saying something one direction and then flipping the sentence around. Opposites. We call this oxymorons or juxtaposition as an English teacher, but slamming 2 things next to each other that really don't fit. Bittersweet, hot, cold. That's all. And finally, comparison. More this than this. Those are the 4 ways you can create contrast. I'm going to show you some examples from political rhetoric and other quotes, and you'll start to see them in operation and recognise why some of these phrases are so memorable. Winston Churchill said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." See the contrast created straight away. Courage is the theme, stand up and speak, sit down and listen. Right? Got some contradiction in there. John F. Kennedy. Only bit of that speech we remember, isn't it? Only bit I remember anyway. Phrase reversal. My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's memorable because it's a piece of rhetoric. Phrase reversal. Simple, but effective. Wise men speak because they have something to say, said Plato. Fools, because they have to say something. Nice quote, bit of phrase reversal, humorous, interesting, memorable. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Emotional reaction. Why? Because contrast has been created. Die tomorrow, live forever. Creates that desperation through vivid contrast. And finally, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Bit of comparison there. Right. And phrase reversal as well. So 2 techniques at play in that one. But can you see why these are so memorable? They're just employing simple pieces of rhetoric. This is the piece of paper on which I wrote to win the National Evaluation Final. You can see there are some boxes that I've been working with, and this was the system that Marcus led me to create over the course of that weekend. I wanted to focus on those 4 principles of feedback. I wanted to be sincere, I wanted to give specific actions, actionable and specific, and be timely with it. But I also wanted to include rhetoric. I knew that if I could in some way elevate the language of my feedback, it would be more impactful and memorable for the audience. And the audience were who I wanted to get to. And I thought, if I can package this feedback in a way that's memorable and catchy, like those quotes, then perhaps I might just stand a chance here. Because I was one of the least experienced people there. Everybody else had written books and spoken internationally and had their businesses. I was a 25-year-old broke English teacher. What did I know, apart from analysing text in front of 10-year-olds every day? I wanted it to be memorable, and this is what I started to do. I developed a system that I'm now going to share with you. And what I'm going to do is take you through the system. Paul has a copy of it for each of you that you can have, and I'm going to model it through with you. We're going to have a bit of interaction with it, and then I'm going to evaluate Anthony's speech in this style. So I hope that this is beneficial in how to develop and produce effective feedback for Toastmasters, but also for your workplaces or whatever else it may be, whether it's a proposal you're evaluating, whatever it is. But let's go. Should we do it? Okay, let's distribute those, and I'll take you through the feedback. If you want to write anything you want on this, your own notes or anything we're discussing, absolutely fine. Perfectly happy for that to happen. Use these as you see fit. We'll have more if anybody wants to adopt this evaluation style during the course of the future meetings, but I hope this is helpful for you. Thank you, Paul, for helping me. Thanks, Paul.
Speaker name, I'm stuck. Speaker name.
All right. 9-box wonder, I call it, because there are 9 boxes, and it led me to do something. It was a bit of a wonder for me. I never expected to get so far with it. So, 9-box wonder. Here we go. Top box. You write the speaker's name for 2 reasons. 1, when the adrenaline's pumping and you're on a national stage or any stage, you can forget names. That's embarrassing. You don't want to do that. So I wrote the speaker's name in capital letters so that when I glanced at my feedback sheet, I started with their name and I didn't forget it. The second reason is because the feedback is for the speaker. So while I would address everybody in the room, I would start with, Anthony, thank you for your speech. It's Anthony's feedback, he owns it. So address them by name because it's personalised feedback, and make sure you don't forget the name. Because in a busy setting, in a workplace, you might have spoken to many people and you want to be specific as to whose name you're using. So you can never underestimate the simplicity of just writing a name. Keyword or phrase. I would suggest 3, the rule of 3, to get your rhetoric in. So what you want there are 3 adjectives to describe the speech. If you thought it was engaging, interesting and informative, write those 3 words down. That gets the rule of 3 into the very first sentence. And it also allows you to prepare to say them again in the conclusion. Whatever key words you say here, you say here. Why? Because if you've studied English, you know that writers and speakers love a structure. And what happens in an evaluation is if you say the same words in the conclusion, it's an audible signal to your audience and they know that your feedback is coming to an end. It creates a rounded structure and a conclusion for them. So if I said that this was engaging, informative and instructive, I would say it's engaging, informative and instructive in the conclusion. And I would say thank you again, job done. So you've already got the structure. Bear in mind I had 5 minutes to craft this. I was on the clock, so I was under pressure. So this helped me again to know exactly what I was doing between the introduction and conclusion. Very brief summary of the speech goes in the next box. No more than 2 sentences. In a 3.5 minute evaluation, the audience do not want 2.5 minutes of you repeating what they just heard. They heard the speech, they know the speech. What they want to know is what did the speaker do very well and what could the speaker do to improve themselves as a speaker next time. So you give 1 or 2 sentences to summarise the speech. I like to use contrast in here. So I might say something like, it's easy to panic and be worried, but you made us feel calm and confident, for example. I'd create a contrast there, because you want your rhetoric. Then, you pose a question. You create puzzle and solution. What did Anthony do to make this an effective speech? Why do I do that? Because it invites the audience to participate in the evaluation process. They start to think, and they go, well, I heard the speech, what was effective about it? Oh, I wonder. And then you help, in part, to provide an answer. But you've engaged the audience by asking them a question. You then provide praise on these 3 areas. I only focus on these 3 because there's so much to say for each one. So I might compliment Anthony on his use of content, something he said, or how it was put together. I might compliment him on how he used his voice and his language. I will then compliment him on how he used his gesture and his movement to enhance the speech. Then I pose another question, puzzle and solution. How can we help Anthony develop as a speaker? That's a great question. I don't really like the question, how could this speech be improved? Because if you improve the speaker, you improve every speech they ever give. So I like to focus on the speaker. How to improve the speaker? I then give a recommendation on these 3 same topics. Sometimes for all 3, if there is one for all 3, but at least a recommendation or 2 based on the same topics. Then we come to the conclusion, which is overall, this was repeat the keywords and conclude. I did this in the evaluation final in Norwich in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. So it fits, just. That's the basic structure. By no means is this a finished article. It's the best I've got at the moment. It may develop over time. But what I'm wanting to do now is develop this for Anthony's speech. I have some ideas, but I want some ideas from you as well. And then I'm going to deliver the evaluation as my conclusion. All right. But you can put other rhetoric in, but I want you to listen out for the rhetoric because that's what elevates the language of the feedback. So that's the template you're using. How could we use it elsewhere in Toastmasters? Well, I've got these grids here for General Evaluator and Table Topics Evaluator. Why not in future, as you're performing these roles, write your feedback and then next to here, where the speaker is, write contrast, rule of 3, puzzle and solution, and challenge yourself to include that language in your evaluation. We want to push ourselves here. It's good if you can take on a role, good if you can take on 2 or 3. Best if you can say, how can I better execute the role I'm about to take on? So you could say, as a general evaluator, how did our timekeeper perform his role this evening? Question, puzzle and solution. It's easy when you're a timekeeper to be flustered and panicky. Paul was calm and confident. I've created contrast. He was efficient, methodical, and on top of things. Rule of 3. Do you see how this works? As soon as you start to employ this rhetoric in giving people feedback, it's memorable and it creates that emotional reaction because you've developed contrast. So how do we put this to work into Anthony's evaluation? I'm going to leave that quote on as we do this because it was the quote that I saw just after I'd won the final. It's the courage to take feedback, to apply feedback, and to change our practice as a result. I hope that serves as a fitting backdrop for the rest of this. Here we go. Have your sheets ready, and if you want to input into this, I would be very grateful to you. We're going to do a joint evaluation It might win next year's title. Shall we see?
Oh, oh.
Here's the grid in my scrolly English teacher handwriting. Anthony, 3 key words. I'm going to provide these because these are 3 I thought of and I'm pleased with them. All right. I thought, Anthony, your speech was punchy. I thought it was pacey, and I thought it was persuasive. Those are my 3 key words. Where am I going to put them now? At the bottom. Punchy, pacey, persuasive. Okay, I summarised the speech into 3 positive words, rule of 3, all beginning with P, alliteration as well. Why not? So we've got that bit. Brief summary of the speech. In 1 sentence, what did Anthony talk about?
Communication.
Okay, communication style. Okay. So it took us on a journey about his communication style and impressed upon us how important it was that he's found his, that we think about the environment as well. That was your takeaway message. Right? So that's the 1 sentence summary. I'm not going to go into repeating everything he said, because some of it might come out here as well. Right? I want to create some contrast. Okay? Because the topic that Anthony addressed can often be a very doom and gloom, serious, panicky topic. So I could mention that, often incites panic, but what Anthony did was it took us off guard with humour and engaged us in a different way onto quite a serious topic. So I can create some contrast there. So I've already used rule of 3, I've already used contrast, and I'm just about to use puzzle and solution. So I've used 3 pieces of rhetoric in the opening few sentences. How was it engaging? Okay, let's start with structure and content. How did the way Anthony put his speech together engage you as an audience? What did he do?
His introduction was really strong.
Okay, told us the anecdote, didn't he, the story, which engaged us. Yeah? So he had an anecdote at his introduction. Thank you very much, great suggestion. So he had the anecdote at the beginning. Anything else? Do you want to speak?
He had a beginning, a middle, and an end, quite
Okay.
well distinct.
Yeah, so well structured. And there was quite a strong conclusion as well, wasn't there? With that imperative of now. Okay, because now is the time for action. Okay, this was good. Yes.
It kind of had a narrative, didn't it?
Yeah. So there was a running narrative through the speech. Great, love that. Voice and language. How did Anthony use his voice or some of his language to engage with an audience? What did he do? What did you find engaging?
His tone, varied tone.
Okay, good. So variation of tone. Love it.
You could feel the emotion, like the excitement.
Good. Okay, so it created emotion and excitement. Clearly passionate about the topic, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it came across through his voice. Fantastic. Richard?
This is almost like a follow-on for the first point, but when he was talking about the radio presenters, putting some almost emotion into that description as well. So yeah. I don't know how you'd word that, but
Well, it wasn't just emotion, there was a range, wasn't there? So a range of different emotions through the speech. And so at points there was urgency and frustration, certainly towards the end. So a range of emotions. Tom?
He used certain inflections when he was teasing us about what he wasn't going to tell us.
Yeah. And this again comes into the use of humour, doesn't it? And I would mention probably in the structure and the content, and I'm sure this was deliberate, Anthony, because it was very effective, that repetition of, but I've got to talk about communication styles, and you were telling us what you weren't telling us. That worked very well. And that's another rhetorical device, is repetition. So used to great effect. Movement or gesture? Anything there you'd like to praise Anthony on? Peter, please.
He dances.
He dances?
Yes.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean?
Well, you don't walk across the stage. It's difficult to show with a half-functioning knee, but as you just go from here to here, as you do this. I mean, it's very discreet, and I don't think he knows he's doing it, but it's very engaging. Yeah.
We'll put fluid movement. Right? Strictly come Toastmasters. Right? Anything else on gesture or movement that Anthony did well, do you think?
Lots of energy.
Okay, excellent. So it was energetic. And at times it was quite infectious. I felt his passion through his movement and his use of gesture. Right? And his gestures were reflective of what he was telling us. His transatlantic cable was a very nice one. Excellent. Okay. Can we develop Anthony as a speaker?
Talk about structure and content.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first half, he talked about the more like the content of the questionnaire he did, and then he got on to more like the personal stuff and how it applied, and maybe that should have been short and more of the personal stuff.
Okay. So breakup of structure. Okay. Anything else?
I was a little unsure when Anthony started if he was talking about communication as in when he's on stage speaking to an audience, or whether he was talking about communication one-on-one, and it was only later in the speech that became clear. So I'd have liked a bit more signposting as to what exactly this communication was all about.
Okay, so possibly a little bit more signposted. Okay. And I think there was one more that I gave, and it wasn't necessarily all the way through, because I think the beginning of the speech was phenomenally well paced when you were telling the story. I thought there was that lovely use of tone of voice and a variation in speed. But once you got going through the 4 types of communicator, it almost whistled by me, and I struggled to make my notes. So possibly thinking about places through the speech to slow down and emphasise particular points, for me personally as a listener, would have been beneficial. And then you've got the conclusion, overall, this was this. I look forward to the next one. Right, here's what I'm going to do. I've made some notes as well on one of the grids. What I'm now going to do is deliver a speech evaluation in this style, using some of what you've mentioned and some of what I've mentioned, and hopefully it comes in time. Okay, ready? Here we go. Anthony, thank you for your wonderfully provocative speech about It's All Talk regarding the environment. It was punchy, it was pacey, and persuasive. We found ourselves taken on a journey, anecdotally, through your experience of pathways, to discovering your communication style, ending at an alarming message about the environment and how we should take action about it. How did Anthony make this an effective and an engaging speech? He firstly did it through his use of structure. He began with an anecdote, a story of his experience of engaging with pathways, which can paralyse a lot of people, but he showed how it could be progressive. He then took us through the 4 types of communicator, but ended with a powerful conclusion about how we need to now take action about our environment. The speech was well structured, it had a beginning, a middle, and a clear end. You used your voice and language, Anthony, to engage us because you have a natural vocal variety. You're an effective storyteller. And certainly the beginning of the speech, the tone of voice, the variation, and the pace had us as an audience in the palm of your hand. We were engaged. There was excellent use of humour and some effective repetition when you were talking about, but I don't want to talk about transatlantic cables or prime ministers that got shot. I want to talk about communication styles. You teased us that way, and that was a very engaging technique for us as an audience. There were open, illustrative gestures. Your stance was excellent, and your eye contact was all corners of the room, particularly me, who was over there right in the corner. So very well done. How do we develop Anthony as a speaker? Where does he go from here? I would firstly recommend a little more variation of pace, particularly in the middle of the speech. In the introduction, it was excellently paced, but I felt it became a little